My name is Howard, 35, and until last month I was living what anyone would call the American dream. 7 years of marriage to Sarah, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a thriving career as a software engineer. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from the people we trust the most. I never imagined how quickly my life would unravel when Sarah casually announced she was going to her sister's for a month. Before I tell you how my seemingly perfect marriage crumbled overnight, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship. Sarah and I met 9 years ago at a tech conference in Seattle. I was presenting a new software solution my company had developed, and she was there representing her marketing firm. Our eyes met across the crowded convention center, and by the end of the day we were sharing coffee and exchanging contact information. There was an immediate connection between us that I had never experienced before. Sarah was intelligent, ambitious, beautiful, and had this infectious laugh that could light up an entire room. Our relationship progressed quickly. We dated for 2 years before I proposed during a sunset hike at Mount Rainier. It was perfect. Just the two of us, the majestic mountain backdrop, and a promise to build a life together. She cried when I got down on one knee, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive when she said yes. We bought our home in a nice suburban neighborhood with excellent schools, planning ahead for the family we hope to have someday. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a spacious backyard where I imagined our future children playing. Sarah poured her heart into decorating every room, creating a space that reflected both our personalities. The kitchen was her domain with top-of-the-line appliances, since she loved hosting dinner parties, while I set up my home office with the latest tech gear for when I worked remotely. Our careers were both on upward trajectories. Sarah had climbed the corporate ladder to become the marketing director at Nelson & Gray, a position that came with prestige, but also frequent business trips. I had helped grow my software company from a small startup to a respected mid-sized firm specializing in cybersecurity solutions. We were financially comfortable, able to take nice vacations and still put away money for our future. We had a solid social circle that included couples like Marcus and Kayla, who had been our friends since college, and several of Sarah's colleagues whom we would meet for monthly dinner parties. Every summer we hosted a big barbecue in our backyard, and during the holidays our home was the gathering place for both our families. From the outside looking in, we were the couple others aspired to be. The first 3 years of our marriage were harmonious. We traveled to Europe, renovated parts of our home, and talked about when to start trying for children. Sarah wanted to reach certain career milestones first, and I was supportive of her ambitions. We agreed to revisit the conversation after her 30th birthday, which seemed like a reasonable timeline for both of us. Looking back now, I can pinpoint when things began to change, though at the time I dismissed the warning signs as temporary phases or work stress. Sarah became increasingly distant about 4 years into our marriage. Conversations about our future became vague and were often deflected. When I brought up the topic of children as we had planned, she would say she needed more time to feel established in her new director position. The intimate moments between us became less frequent. Sarah often stayed late at the office, returning home exhausted and heading straight to bed. Our weekend rituals of cooking breakfast together and taking long walks in the neighborhood park gradually faded away. She started having more girls' nights with her coworkers, sometimes not returning until the early morning hours. I also noticed a change in how she guarded her privacy. Her phone was always password protected, which hadn't bothered me before, but she began to leave the room to take calls and would quickly switch screens on her laptop when I entered the room. Once, when I picked up her phone to pass it to her after she got a text, she snapped at me an overreaction that left me confused and hurt. Being the eternal optimist, I tried to reignite the spark in our relationship. I planned surprise date nights, booked weekend getaways, and even suggested marriage counseling, which she dismissed as unnecessary. "We're fine, Howard," she would say. "Just busy with work." This is what adult relationships look like sometimes. I accepted her explanation because I wanted to believe her. About a year ago, a name started appearing regularly in Sarah's stories about work: Jason. He was a new creative director who had transferred from the company's West Coast office. According to Sarah, he was revolutionizing their marketing approach and bringing in major new clients. At first, I thought nothing of it. Sarah had always been enthusiastic about talented colleagues. Then the mentions of Jason became more frequent and personal. She knew his coffee order, his favorite lunch spot, details about his divorce 2 years prior. They were partnered on a major campaign which meant late nights and weekend work sessions. My stomach would knot when she would light up talking about his innovative ideas or laugh at inside jokes from their office. When I gently asked if I should be concerned about her relationship with Jason, Sarah accused me of being insecure and controlling. He's a colleague, Howard. A professional relationship. I can't believe you would even suggest something inappropriate is happening. Her indignation made me feel ashamed of my suspicions, and I apologized for doubting her. I tried to be the understanding husband. Sarah's career was important to her, and by extension to us. If this new project with Jason was her big break, I needed to support her through the demanding work schedule, but the knot in my stomach never fully went away. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. I was making coffee in the kitchen when Sarah came downstairs with an overnight bag already dressed for the day in casual clothes rather than her usual work attire. Something about her demeanor felt off immediately. She was avoiding eye contact and had an energy that felt both nervous and determined. "I need to tell you something," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I'm going to stay at Melissa's for a while. A month, maybe. I need some space to think." I nearly dropped my mug. Her sister Melissa lived in Portland over 3 hours away. In 7 years of marriage, Sarah had never once expressed needing space or a break from our relationship. "What do you mean?" "Think about what I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, despite the sudden pounding in my chest. Just everything. Us. My career. What I want for my future." She took a sip of her coffee, still not meeting my eyes. "Please, don't call me while I'm gone. I need this time to clear my head without any pressure." The request hit me like a physical blow. "Don't call her for a month, Sarah. If something's wrong, we should talk about it. That's what marriage is about. Working through things together. There's nothing to talk about right now, Howard. That's the point. I need to figure out what I'm feeling before I can explain it to you." Her tone had an edge of irritation. "Can you just respect what I'm asking for? 1 month of space isn't going to kill you." I noticed her luggage by the door, not just the overnight bag she had brought downstairs, but a full-size suitcase. "That seems like a lot of packing for staying with your sister." "I don't know exactly how long I'll be there. Could be more than a month." She shrugged, an oddly casual gesture for such a significant announcement. "Did you take time off work?" I asked, trying to understand the logistics of this sudden plan. "I've worked everything out. It's fine." Her vague response and defensive posture only increased my concern. Despite the alarm bells ringing in my head, I took a deep breath. Pushing her when she was already pulling away seemed counterproductive. "Okay. If that's what you need, just please check in occasionally, so I know you're all right." She nodded dismissively. "Sure. I'll text." Then she glanced at her watch. "I need to get on the road to beat traffic." As she gathered her things, I noticed something strange about what she was packing. Mixed in with casual clothes were several new dresses I had never seen before, still, with tags attached. A shopping bag from an upscale boutique contained what looked like new swimwear, which seemed odd for a stay in Portland in April. When I helped carry her suitcase to the car, it felt heavier than I expected for a sister visit. Our goodbye was brief and cold. No real hug, just a quick peck on the cheek and a wave as she backed out of the driveway. I stood there watching until her car disappeared around the corner, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. The first few days after Sarah left were a fog of confusion and worry. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, to avoid coming home to our empty house. When I did return, I would sit in the quiet living room replaying our last conversation, searching for clues I might have missed. I called Marcus 3 days after Sarah left, needing to talk to someone who knew us both. We met for beers at our usual sports bar where I explained the situation. "Man, that's rough," Marcus said, shaking his head. "But honestly, sometimes people do need space to get perspective. Kayla and I went through something similar last year. Remember, We took 2 weeks apart and it actually helped. But you two talked during that time, I pointed out. You had a plan. This feels different. Something's not right. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. Try not to overthink it. Give her the space she asked for. She'll reach out when she's ready. I nodded but couldn't shake my unease. The next day I called Sarah's workplace on a pretext, asking to speak with her about a delivery to our home. The receptionist informed me that Sarah was not in the office and referred me to her assistant, who seemed surprised by my call. "Oh, I thought you knew," the assistant said hesitantly. Sarah put in for extended personal leave. She won't be back in the office until next month. This confirmed she had planned this departure in advance, but hadn't been honest with me about it. Extended personal leave was different from taking vacation days to visit a sister. Something didn't add up. 5 days after Sarah left, the first social media post appeared. It wasn't on her main profile, but on her Instagram stories. A sunset over a beach, with a tropical cocktail in the foreground. The location tag showed Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Not Portland. Not her sister's house. My hands shook as I stared at the image. Melissa lived in a modest suburban home with her husband and 2 children. There was no beach anywhere near her neighborhood. Sarah had lied to me about where she was going. I didn't confront her. I waited and watched as more posts appeared over the next few days. Beautiful beach scenes, elegant restaurant dinners, hotel, poolside lounges. In none of them did Sarah appear directly, but the narrative was clear. She was enjoying a luxury vacation, not a soul-searching sister visit. Then came the photo that confirmed my worst fears. Sarah had posted a beachside lunch scene, and in the background, partially visible but unmistakable, was Jason. His distinctive watch and the edge of the tribal tattoo on his forearm were clearly visible across the table from where the photo had been taken. My stomach dropped. The pieces were falling into place. The sudden need for space, the fancy new clothes, the lie about visiting Melissa. Sarah wasn't sorting through her feelings about our marriage. She was on a romantic getaway with her colleague. Over the next 2 weeks, the evidence mounted. Though Sarah was careful never to post photos of herself with Jason directly, he appeared in the periphery of several images. A reflection in a restaurant window, a shadow on the beach, his distinctive laugh, audible in the background of a short video. I still didn't confront her. Some part of me kept hoping for an innocent explanation, even as the rational part of my brain accepted the betrayal. I waited, watching the digital breadcrumbs of my wife's infidelity accumulate day after day. The final confirmation came 18 days into her sister visit. Sarah posted a photo of an elaborate seafood dinner with 2 champagne glasses, candles, and rose petals scattered across the white tablecloth. The caption read, "Perfect evening with my favorite person. Blessed new beginnings." There was no mistaking the romantic nature of the setting or the implication of the hashtags. I sat in our darkened living room, staring at that photo for hours, cycling through emotions: disbelief, rage, heartbreak, humiliation. The woman I had built my life around, who had promised to love and honor me, was publicly flaunting her affair while assuming I remained in the dark. The calculated deception of it all, the elaborate lie about her sister, the request not to contact her, the carefully framed photos hiding her companion's identity while still broadcasting her betrayal to the world. It was all too much to bear. That night I made my decision. If Sarah wanted new beginnings, I would give her exactly that, just not the one she was expecting. I broke down that night in a way I never had before. Alone in our bedroom, surrounded by photographs of happier times, I let the full weight of Sarah's betrayal crash over me. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. 7 years of marriage, 9 years of building a life together. All the dreams we had shared. It felt like all of it had been a lie. Around midnight, when the initial shock had subsided enough for me to think clearly, I called my brother Thomas. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "Howard, everything okay?" His voice was groggy with sleep. No, I managed to say before my voice broke again. Sarah's cheating on me. Thomas was immediately alert. I'm so sorry, man. Are you sure? I explained everything. Her sudden departure, the lie about visiting Melissa, the beach photos, Jason appearing in the background. Thomas listened without interrupting, then offered the brotherly support I desperately needed. This is not your fault, he said firmly. But what happens next is your choice. Have you thought about what you want to do? I can't stay with her, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it aloud. I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't look at her and not see those photos, not think about her with him. I understand, Thomas replied. But you need to be smart about this. Don't do anything impulsive. Talk to a lawyer before you confront her. His advice was sound. The next morning I called Meredith Klein, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. She was able to see me that afternoon. Meredith's office was sleek and professional, much like the woman herself. She listened intently as I outlined the situation, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Based on what you've told me, you have grounds for divorce on the basis of adultery, she explained. However, proving adultery can be challenging and messy. A no-fault divorce citing irreconcilable differences might be cleaner and faster. What about a legal separation first, I asked, remembering something I had read online. That's certainly an option. It creates space and time to consider next steps while establishing some legal protections for both parties. She outlined the process, the paperwork required, and the potential timeline. And the house, our finances. These practical concerns help distract me from the emotional turmoil. Washington is a community property state, which generally means assets acquired during the marriage are divided equally. However, there are nuances depending on various factors. She began explaining the complexities of property division, separate versus community assets, and financial considerations. By the end of our 2-hour consultation, I had a clearer understanding of my options and a preliminary plan. Meredith agreed to prepare the legal separation paperwork while I gathered financial documents and evidence of the affair. Back home, I began methodically implementing my plan. First, I contacted Jeremy Peterson, a realtor who had helped us buy our home. He came over that evening to assess the property and discuss listing options. The market's hot right now, Jeremy said as we walked through the house. Given your location and the upgrades you've made, I think we could list at $650,000 and expect multiple offers. The thought of selling our home, the place where we had built so many memories, brought a fresh wave of grief. But it also felt cleansing, like excising a tumor. This house was no longer a home. It was a monument to betrayal. Next, I visited my bank and opened a new account in my name, only transferring half of our joint savings. I didn't touch Sarah's personal accounts or her retirement funds. I wanted to be fair, not vindictive. I also met with our financial advisor to understand the implications of dividing our investments and assets. Throughout this process, Sarah continued posting from Mexico. She sent occasional texts that were deliberately vague. Hope everything's good, or weather's nice here. I responded with equally non-committal messages, giving no indication that I knew the truth or was preparing for her return. When she texted, asking if I could send her some additional funds because she was running low, I replied with a simple, "Money sent. Enjoy your trip." I transferred exactly what she asked for, knowing it would be the last financial support I provided. Simultaneously, I was gathering evidence. I downloaded and archived all her social media posts showing her in Mexico. I collected phone records showing numerous calls and texts to Jason's number in the months leading up to her departure. I found receipts for the new clothes and swimwear purchased on our joint credit card, along with a booking confirmation for the resort in Cabo, accidentally left in her email trash folder on our shared computer. 2 weeks into Sarah's absence, I hired a locksmith to change all the locks on our home. I explained that my wife and I were separating, and I needed to secure the property. The locksmith was professional and discreet, completing the work in under 2 hours. The next day, I filed the legal separation paperwork with Meredith's assistance. The documents clearly outlined the division of our assets, including the pending sale of our home and the equal distribution of proceeds. I cited irreconcilable differences rather than adultery, following Meredith's advice to keep the process as clean as possible. Perhaps the most difficult task was packing up Sarah's belongings. I rented a climate-controlled storage unit and spent a weekend carefully boxing her clothes, jewelry, books, and personal mementos. I was meticulous, making a detailed inventory of everything, taking photographs as documentation. Despite my anger, I handled her possessions with care. They weren't mine to damage or discard, regardless of how much she had hurt me. Throughout this process, a few close friends provided invaluable support. Marcus came over to help with the heavy lifting, having shifted from his initial give her space position once I showed him the evidence of Sarah's affair. My cousin Alicia, who lived nearby, brought meals and checked in regularly to make sure I was eating and sleeping. 3 weeks after Sarah left, the FOR sale sign went up in our front yard, and our house listing went live online. Jeremy had done an excellent job with the photographs and virtual tour, highlighting the renovated kitchen, spacious master suite, and landscaped backyard. Within 24 hours, we had 3 showing requests. As I sat alone in my soon-to-be former home that evening, looking at the real estate listing on my laptop, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. Everything was in motion now. There was no turning back. With the initial shock of betrayal beginning to subside and my strategic response in place, I realized I needed to focus on myself. For too long, I had defined myself primarily as Sarah's husband, allowing my own identity and needs to take a back seat to our marriage. Now was the time to reclaim who I was as an individual. My first step was finding a therapist. Dr. Reynolds specialized in helping people through divorce and betrayal trauma. Our first session was difficult. Naming the pain and acknowledging the depth of Sarah's deception brought fresh waves of hurt. But Dr. Reynolds provided a safe space to process these emotions. "What you're feeling is completely normal," he assured me during our second session. Betrayal triggers the same neurological pathways as physical pain. Your brain is essentially experiencing this as an injury. He introduced me to specific coping strategies, mindfulness techniques, to manage anxiety, journaling, to process my thoughts, and physical exercise, to release tension and boost endorphins. These tools became my lifeline in the weeks that followed. With newfound clarity, I began reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. Sarah had subtly discouraged certain friendships over the years, particularly with my college buddies like Anthony and Jake, claiming they were immature or a bad influence. Now I understood this had been a form of isolation, a common tactic in controlling relationships. Anthony was shocked when I called him after nearly 2 years of minimal contact. "Howard, man, I was just thinking about you last week." "What's going on?" Over beers at a local brewery, I explained the situation. Anthony's support was immediate and unwavering. "That's brutal, but you're handling it like a champion. And for what it's worth, I always thought Sarah had a superior attitude. You deserve better." Reconnecting with old friends revealed a pattern I hadn't noticed before. Sarah had gradually separated me from people who knew me before her. People who valued me for who I was, rather than as part of our couple identity. Rebuilding these connections became an important part of my healing process. Physical transformation became another focus. I joined a gym and hired Derek, a personal trainer, who specialized in working with clients going through major life transitions. Derek didn't go easy on me, which was exactly what I needed. "Channel that anger into your workout," he encouraged during particularly challenging sessions. "Transform it into strength." 3 times a week, I pushed my body to its limits, working through the emotional pain by focusing on physical exertion. Within weeks, I began to see changes, not just in my physique, but in my energy levels and confidence. The man looking back at me in the mirror was becoming someone new, someone stronger. Professionally, I had always been dedicated to my work, but now I channeled additional energy into a project I had been contemplating for months. I developed a prototype for a new security software application and pitched it to my company's board. Their enthusiastic response was validating, and the project gave me purpose during a time when my personal life felt chaotic. My colleague Rebecca noticed the change in my demeanor at work. "Whatever's going on with you lately, it suits you," she commented after a particularly successful client presentation. "You seem more focused, more confident." At home, I continued the process of transformation. I rearranged furniture, donated items we had collected together that held no personal significance for me, and repainted the master bedroom in a color I had always preferred but Sarah had vetoed. These physical changes to my environment helped reinforce the psychological shift taking place. Each week I checked in with Meredith about the legal separation process. Everything was proceeding smoothly, though she warned me to prepare for potential complications once Sarah returned and discovered what had happened. Based on what you've told me about her personality, she's likely to react strongly, Meredith cautioned. Stay calm, document everything, and direct all communication through me if things get heated. During this time, I received several calls from Sarah's family, particularly her mother, Linda, asking if I had heard from Sarah and expressing concern about her extended absence. I maintained the fiction Sarah had created, saying only that she was taking some personal time and would return when she was ready. It wasn't my place to expose her affair, though keeping her secret felt like a final act of loyalty she didn't deserve. As I continued therapy with Dr. Reynolds, I gained insight into patterns in our marriage that had been unhealthy from the beginning. Sarah's need for control, her subtle put-downs disguised as jokes, her dismissal of my concerns as overreactions, these were all warning signs I had ignored out of love and a desire to keep the peace. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect and honesty, Dr. Reynolds explained. What you're describing sounds more like a power dynamic, where your needs were consistently subordinated to hers. This realization was both painful and liberating. While it didn't excuse Sarah's infidelity, it helped me understand how we had reached this point, and more importantly, what I needed to avoid in future relationships. I also joined a support group for men going through divorce, which met weekly at a community center downtown. Listening to others share similar experiences helped normalize my own and provided practical advice for navigating the challenges ahead. Ted, who was 6 months further along in his divorce process, became a particular source of wisdom. The legal stuff will get resolved one way or another, Ted advised during coffee after one session. The real work is figuring out who you are without her and what you want your life to look like going forward. Meanwhile, interest in our house was strong. Jeremy conducted several showings, and by the end of the week, we had 2 competitive offers, both above asking price. I accepted the higher one, which came with a quick closing timeline and minimal contingencies. As the sale moved forward, I began researching apartments in the downtown area, somewhere completely different from our suburban neighborhood. I found a modern loft in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls, industrial-style fixtures, and a rooftop community garden. It represented everything our marital home was not. Urban contemporary. Distinctly mine. With each passing day, I felt more prepared for Sarah's inevitable return. The anxiety that had initially consumed me was gradually replaced by a calm resolve. I had done everything I could to protect myself legally and financially. I had surrounded myself with support. I had begun the process of rebuilding my life without her. When my phone finally displayed Sarah's name 3 weeks into her month-long sister visit, I was ready. The text read, "Coming home tomorrow. We need to talk." No explanation, no apology, just an announcement of her return and the implication of a conversation on her terms. I replied simply, "I'll be here." Those 3 words contained multitudes confirmation. That I knew she wasn't with her sister. That I would be present for the confrontation she didn't yet know was coming. And that I was no longer the malleable husband she had left behind. That night, I slept surprisingly well, confident in the decisions I had made, and ready to face whatever came next. I was working from home the day Sarah returned, specifically to be present when she arrived. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard a car pull into our driveway. From my home office window, I could see her getting out of a taxi, looking tanned and rested from her beach vacation. She had a designer handbag I didn't recognize, slung over her shoulder, and her hair was lighter than when she left, highlighted by the Mexican sundae. What she couldn't see was the for sale sign in our front yard, which had been temporarily removed for a professional photographer to take updated listing photos that morning. Jeremy had assured me it would be reinstalled later that day, but for now the exterior of our home looked unchanged. I watched on the security camera feed as Sarah approached the front door and inserted her key. The confusion on her face when it didn't work was evident even on the small screen. She tried again, jiggling the handle with increasing frustration, then rang the doorbell repeatedly. I didn't answer. After several minutes, she pulled out her phone. Mine rang moments later. Howard, I'm outside and my key isn't working. Can you let me in? Her voice was controlled, but with an undercurrent of irritation. I'm not at home right now, I replied calmly, the lie necessary for my plan. The locks have been changed. What? Why would you change the locks? The irritation was shifting to anger. This is my house too. You can't just lock me out. I filed for legal separation 3 days after you left for your beach vacation with Jason. I said, keeping my voice steady. Not your sister's house in Portland as you claimed. The documentation was delivered to your workplace since I didn't have an accurate address for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice had lost its confidence. Howard, I don't know what you think you know, but we need to talk face to face. Where are you? When will you be home? I can meet you at Riverside Coffee in an hour, I offered, naming a public place where I knew we could have a conversation without it escalating into a scene. We can talk there. I need to shower and change first, she protested. I've been traveling all morning. That's not possible right now. 1 hour at Riverside, or we can reschedule for tomorrow. I was firm, not giving her the opportunity to regain control of the situation. Another pause then. Fine. 1 hour. She hung up without saying goodbye. I watched as she stormed back to the taxi which had waited in our driveway. Once she was gone, I took a deep breath, gathering my strength for the confrontation ahead. I collected the folder of documents I had prepared. Copies of the legal separation, filing evidence of her affair, the house sale agreement, and the inventory of her belongings in storage. Then I drove to the coffee shop, arriving early to secure a quiet table in the corner. Sarah arrived exactly on time, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast day. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over with the confident stride I had once admired. As she sat down across from me, she removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were guarded but determined. This is completely unnecessary, she began, keeping her voice low. Whatever you think is happening, we could have discussed it like adults, instead of you changing locks and filing papers. I looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for 9 years, and felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing a stranger. We're past the point of discussion, Sarah. You lied to me about where you were going. You had an affair with Jason. You betrayed our marriage in the most fundamental way possible. Her expression flickered between surprise and defiance. You've been spying on me, going through my things. That's invasive and controlling. I didn't need to spy, I replied, sliding my phone across the table to show her the Instagram posts she had made. You broadcast your affair for anyone to see, including your husband, who you apparently thought was too stupid to notice Jason in the background of your romantic getaway photos. Sarah's face flushed, but she recovered quickly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I was confused about us, about what I wanted. That's why I needed space. Space in Cabo San Lucas with your colleague while lying to me about visiting your sister. That's not confusion, Sarah. That's calculated deception. I kept my voice steady, refusing to match her emotional manipulation with anger. What about the house? The realtor told me our house is listed for sale. You had no right to do that without consulting me. She was attempting to shift the conversation away from her betrayal. The house is half mine, and I have every right to sell my share. The court will determine the division of proceeds as part of our divorce. I placed the house listing on the table between us. It's already under contract, by the way. Above asking price. Divorce. Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself. Howard, you're overreacting. We can work through this. Couples have problems all the time. They don't immediately jump to divorce. This isn't a problem, Sarah. This is you living a double life and lying to my face about it. And it's not immediate. It's the culmination of years of you prioritizing yourself over our marriage. I paused, gathering myself. Tell me about Jason. How long has it really been going on? Sarah's facade cracked slightly. She looked down at her untouched coffee. It's not what you think. We connected professionally first. The relationship evolved gradually. How long? I repeated my tone, making it clear I wouldn't accept evasion. A few months, she admitted reluctantly. Since the Denver conference in January. 4 months. While she was sleeping next to me, having dinner across from me, making weekend plans with me, she had been involved with another man. The timeline made the betrayal even more acute. And the trip to Mexico? That was planned all along, wasn't it? Not some spontaneous need for space to think. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Jason suggested it. His timeshare was available, and we thought, you thought I wouldn't find out I finished for her. You thought you could take a romantic vacation with your lover. Then come back. And what? Continue our marriage. As if nothing had happened. I was going to tell you when I got back, she claimed, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I just needed time to figure out how I felt. What I wanted. And what did you decide? During your month of reflection that turned into 3 weeks. The sarcasm in my voice was unmistakable. Sarah looked up then, her expression shifting to one I recognized from previous arguments. The look she got when she was about to try to make me feel responsible for her actions. If you had been more attentive, more supportive of my career, maybe this wouldn't have happened. You've been so absorbed in your work, so comfortable in our routine. Jason made me feel alive again. Appreciated. I had anticipated this deflection. I'm not accepting blame for your choices, Sarah. You could have talked to me if you were unhappy. You could have suggested counseling. You could have asked for a divorce honestly. Instead, you chose to lie and cheat. So that's it, 9 years together, and you're throwing it all away without even trying to save our marriage. Her voice took on a wounded quality that once would have made me backpedal, eager to ease her distress. I'm not the one who threw it away, I said quietly. You did that when you decided to betray everything we built together. Sarah's expression hardened, her strategy shifting from wounded innocence to threats. Fine. If this is how you want it, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll take you for everything in the divorce. Half your company, the house, alimony. My lawyer will destroy you. I had been prepared for this reaction as well. Calmly, I opened the folder and laid out the evidence I had gathered. The resort booking in both their names. Phone records showing hundreds of texts and calls. Credit card statements showing dinners and gifts for Jason, all dated months before her supposed sister visit. Washington State considers adultery when determining asset division. I explained, though Meredith had advised me this was an oversimplification. But more importantly, I'm not looking to destroy you, Sarah. I just want a clean break. The separation agreement is fair. Equal division of our assets. No alimony either way. A quick and private dissolution of our marriage. She stared at the documents, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Where are my things? What have you done with my clothes? My jewelry? Everything is in a climate-controlled storage unit. I've paid for 6 months in advance. I slid the storage information and inventory list across the table. Your personal items, family heirlooms, the furniture we agreed was yours when we bought it. It's all there, carefully packed and documented. Sarah's composure finally broke. Tears welled in her eyes. Though whether from genuine remorse or frustration at losing control of the situation, I couldn't tell. I never meant to hurt you, Howard. You have to believe that. But you did hurt me, Sarah. Deliberately and repeatedly. I stood up, gathering the documents back into the folder. My attorney's contact information is in here. Have your lawyer reach out to her to finalize the details. Wait, Sarah said, reaching for my arm as I turned to leave. What about us? Is there really no chance? I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then back at her face. For a brief moment, I saw flashes of the woman I had fallen in love with. The bright smile. The intelligence. the ambition I had once found so attractive. But those fragments couldn't reassemble into something whole again. The trust was irrevocably broken. There is no us anymore, Sarah. You made sure of that. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Goodbye. As I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Sarah sitting alone at the table, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation I had dreaded for weeks was over, and I had maintained my dignity and resolve throughout. Whatever came next would be challenging, but I had faced the worst moment and survived it. The days following our confrontation brought a whirlwind of complications. Sarah had moved into a hotel temporarily, but was determined to make the separation as difficult as possible. Her initial shock had hardened into resentment, and she seemed intent on punishing me for having the audacity to stand up for myself. The first salvo came in the form of social pressure. Sarah began contacting our mutual friends, spinning a narrative that painted her as the victim of my controlling behavior and irrational jealousy. According to her version, she had taken a legitimate business trip with a colleague, and I had overreacted by changing the locks and filing for separation without discussion. Amanda, who had been a close friend to both of us for years, called me demanding an explanation. Sarah says, "You went completely off the deep end because she took a work trip." That doesn't sound like you, Howard. I had decided early on not to engage in a smear campaign. There's more to the story than Sarah is sharing, I replied calmly. I have documentation of everything, but I'd rather not drag you into the middle of our private matters. My restraint paid unexpected dividends. Amanda's voice softened. She also said you accused her of having an affair with Jason. Is that true? Yes. I thought so. Amanda sighed. Howard, I should have said something sooner. I saw them together at Lakeside Restaurant 2 months ago. They definitely weren't just colleagues. Amanda wasn't the only one who had suspected something. Several friends admitted they had noticed Sarah and Jason's unusual closeness at recent social gatherings but hadn't wanted to cause problems by mentioning it. Their support strengthened my resolve during the difficult days ahead. Not everyone was sympathetic, however. Sarah's closest friends rallied around her, sending me accusatory texts and emails. I blocked the most aggressive ones and let the others go unanswered. Engaging would only prolong the drama. The most surprising ally emerged from an unexpected quarter, Sarah's sister, Melissa. She called me a week after Sarah's return, her voice hesitant but determined. Howard, it's Melissa. I need you to know I had no idea Sarah was using me as her cover story. She never planned to visit us. We haven't spoken in months except for occasional texts. This confirmation of Sarah's deception wasn't necessary, but it was validating nonetheless. Thank you for telling me, Melissa. Sarah's always been selective with the truth. Melissa continued, choosing her words carefully. But this crosses a line. Mom and Dad are devastated about the divorce, but they don't know the whole story. Sarah told them you became paranoid and controlling. I'm not going to correct them, I assured her. That's between Sarah and her conscience. Well, I think they should know the truth, Melissa said firmly. This isn't the first time she's rewritten history to make herself the hero of the story. The practical aspects of separation proved equally challenging. Our lives had become thoroughly intertwined over 9 years. Joint bank accounts, shared streaming services, overlapping insurance policies, gym memberships, airline mileage accounts. Disentangling this web required patience and meticulous attention to detail. Each day seemed to bring a new complication. Sarah attempted to withdraw funds from our joint investment account, necessitating an emergency call to our financial advisor. She accidentally had packages delivered to our house, then insisted on picking them up personally, creating opportunities for confrontation. She even tried to cancel the home sale by contacting the buyers directly, though fortunately Jeremy had warned them this might happen. Through it all, I maintained the boundary of communicating only through attorneys when possible. Meredith earned every penny of her fee, fielding Sarah's increasingly aggressive demands with professional calm. She's asking for 60% of the assets now, claiming her career prospects have been damaged by the separation, Meredith informed me during one of our weekly calls. It's a standard negotiating tactic. Ask for more than you expect to get. We'll counter with our original 50-50 proposal. Meanwhile, Jason had disappeared from the picture entirely. According to office gossip relayed by a sympathetic former colleague, he had transferred back to the West Coast office immediately after returning from Mexico. Apparently, he had not anticipated the relationship with Sarah extending beyond their vacation fling. When confronted with the reality of her marital breakdown, he had quickly extricated himself from the situation. Sarah's parents attempted to intervene about a month after her return. They invited me to dinner, ostensibly to hear both sides and see if reconciliation was possible. I declined politely, but firmly. "I appreciate the gesture," I told her father during our phone call, "but the marriage is over. I wish you and Barbara well, but getting together would only make things more difficult for everyone." The pressure from family members continued nonetheless. Sarah's cousin Taylor, with whom I had always had a good relationship, reached out to suggest marriage counseling. Her Aunt Susan left a tearful voicemail about the sanctity of marriage vows. Even my own mother, who had initially been supportive, began to wonder if I was being too hasty. "Marriages go through rough patches, Howard," she said during one of our weekly calls. "Your father and I nearly separated twice during our 40 years together." "Did either of you have an affair and lie about it for months?" I asked gently. My mother's silence was answer enough. The house sale proceeded despite Sarah's attempts to derail it. The buyers were understanding about the situation and agreed to a slight extension on the closing date to accommodate the legal complications. 2 months after I had first listed the property, we finalized the sale with the proceeds held in escrow, pending final divorce settlement. The mediation session required by the court before our divorce could proceed was perhaps the most difficult day of the entire process. Sitting across from Sarah at a conference table with our respective attorneys and a court-appointed mediator present, I had to listen as she continued to minimize her actions and maximize my supposed failings. It was during this session that I learned the affair with Jason hadn't been her first infidelity. In an apparent attempt to demonstrate that our marriage had been troubled for years, Sarah casually mentioned that situation with Robert from marketing 3 years earlier. I froze, my mind racing. Robert had been a client who had worked closely with Sarah's team for several months. She had mentioned him occasionally, but never in a way that raised suspicions. Now, watching her discuss another betrayal as if it were common knowledge, I realized how completely I had been deceived throughout our marriage. Meredith, sensing my shock, called for a brief recess. In the hallway outside the conference room, I struggled to process this new information. "Did you know about this?" I asked Meredith. "No," she admitted, "but it actually strengthens our position. She's effectively admitted to multiple instances of infidelity." When we resumed the mediation, I found myself oddly calm. The revelation about Robert should have been another devastating blow, but instead it provided a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't about Jason or even about me. Sarah's behavior reflected her character, not my worth as a husband. The mediation ended with a tentative agreement close to my original proposal. Equal division of assets, no ongoing financial entanglements, a clean and final break. Sarah's attorney requested time to review the terms with his client, but the mediator seemed confident we had found a workable solution. As I left the building, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Each revelation about Sarah's true nature, while painful in the moment, ultimately helped me release any lingering doubts about ending the marriage. The woman I had loved either never truly existed or had changed beyond recognition. Either way, I was finally ready to move forward without her. 6 months after that fateful day when Sarah announced her sister visit, our divorce was finalized. The house had been sold, the proceeds divided according to our settlement agreement, and I had been living in my downtown loft for nearly 4 months. The legal paperwork that officially dissolved our 9-year relationship arrived without ceremony, delivered by courier to my office on a Tuesday afternoon. I signed where indicated, sent the documents back, and continued with my workday. There were no tears, no dramatic moment of closure, just the quiet ending of one chapter and the continuation of another that had already begun. My new apartment had become a true home, reflecting my personality in ways our marital house never had. Industrial-style furnishings, abstract art, I had always appreciated, but Sarah had dismissed as too modern, and a state-of-the-art home entertainment system surrounded by my vinyl record collection that had previously been relegated to the basement. The rooftop garden had become my weekend sanctuary where I grew herbs and vegetables alongside my neighbors in the building. The financial settlement had been surprisingly straightforward in the end. Once Sarah realized her attempts at character assassination weren't gaining traction, she agreed to the equal division of assets we had initially proposed. We each kept our respective retirement accounts, split the investment portfolio, and divided the proceeds from the house sale. There was no alimony either way, as we both earned comparable salaries. It was a clean break, with no ongoing financial entanglements to keep us connected. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected letter from Sarah. Unlike her previous communications, which had been either accusatory or manipulative, this one appeared genuinely reflective. "Howard," she wrote, "after months of therapy and self-reflection, I've come to recognize the extent of the pain I caused you. My behavior was inexcusable, and while I know an apology cannot undo the damage, I want you to know that I am truly sorry. You deserved better than the way I treated you throughout our marriage, not just at the end. I hope someday you can find happiness with someone worthy of your trust and loyalty." The letter was signed simply Sarah, with no expectation of response or reconciliation. I read it twice, then filed it away in a folder with the other divorce documents. The apology was appreciated but ultimately unnecessary for my healing process. I had already made peace with the end of our marriage and had no desire to reopen communication. As I reflected on our relationship from the perspective of time and distance, I could now see the red flags that had been present from early on. Sarah's need to control situations, her dismissal of my concerns, as overreactions, her subtle put-downs disguised as jokes. These patterns had existed throughout our relationship, but I had rationalized them away, out of love, and a desire to keep the peace. The most valuable lesson I learned was the importance of trusting my intuition. My gut had told me something was wrong, long before I had concrete evidence of Sarah's affair. The knot in my stomach when she mentioned Jason's name, the sense of unease when she became protective of her phone. These were warning signals I had chosen to ignore. Intuition isn't mystical. Dr. Reynolds had explained during one of our sessions. It's your brain processing information below the level of conscious awareness. When something feels wrong, it's often because your subconscious has noticed inconsistencies. Your conscious mind hasn't yet assembled into a coherent picture. I had continued therapy throughout the divorce process, gradually reducing from weekly to monthly sessions as I processed my emotions and developed healthier perspectives. Dr. Reynolds had been instrumental in helping me recognize that while Sarah's betrayal had wounded me deeply, it didn't define me or determine my future capacity for trust and intimacy. Building new friendships became an essential part of my healing journey. My reconnection with Anthony had blossomed into regular basketball games and weekend hiking trips. Through him, I met other men with similar interests and values, expanding my social circle beyond the couples-focused group Sarah and I had maintained. I also discovered the satisfaction of volunteering, something I had always wanted to do but had never prioritized during my marriage. Every Saturday morning, I taught coding basics to disadvantaged teens through a community program called Future Tech Leaders. Watching these young people grasp concepts and develop confidence in their abilities became one of the most rewarding aspects of my week. It was at a fundraising event for this program that I met Emma, a software engineer who volunteered with a similar organization across town. Our conversation flowed easily, touching on technology trends, favorite hiking trails, and our shared passion for empowering the next generation of tech professionals. When she suggested continuing our discussion over coffee sometime, I found myself agreeing without hesitation. Our first date was refreshingly straightforward. No games, no hidden agendas. Emma was direct about her interest and equally clear about her expectations of honesty and open communication in relationships. When I shared a condensed version of my divorce experience, she listened without judgment. "Trust has to be earned," she said simply. "And it sounds like you've learned to trust yourself first, which is the most important step." As our relationship developed over the following months, I approached it with a wisdom born from experience. I was more attentive to both my needs and hers, more willing to address concerns directly rather than letting them fester, and more aware of the difference between healthy compromise and unhealthy sacrifice. Most importantly, I no longer ignored warning signs or dismissed my intuition. When something felt off, I addressed it immediately, creating a foundation of transparency that strengthened rather than threatened our connection. The divorce that had once seemed like the end of my world had ultimately become the beginning of a more authentic life. I had rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged during my marriage: my passion for music, my enjoyment of spontaneous adventures, my need for occasional solitude to recharge. If there was a silver lining to Sarah's betrayal, it was the opportunity it created for genuine growth and self-discovery. The man I had become through this painful process was more confident, more self-aware, and ultimately more capable of genuine intimacy than the person I had been before. Looking back on that Tuesday morning when Sarah announced her sister visit, I now recognized it as the first step on a necessary journey rather than the catastrophe it had initially appeared to be. The end of our marriage had been inevitable given who Sarah truly was and who I was becoming. The only variable was how and when it would happen. Have you ever experienced that moment when betrayal suddenly clarifies everything? That instant when all the small inconsistencies suddenly align into a pattern you can finally see clearly? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most meaningful beginnings. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons, and remember, trusting your gut might be the most important relationship skill you'll ever develop. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to face your own challenging truths with the same dignity and strength I eventually found.